You probably remember the moment. The whole world was watching. The marble steps of St. John Lateran were soaked in light, the cardinals in red, the banners fluttering, cameras flashing, and there he stood, barefoot, silent, different. He didn't lift his hands in blessing. He didn't speak in Latin. He didn't offer platitudes or repeat old lines. He looked into the eyes of the world, and he said 9 words. "I'm not American, I'm Peruvian." And just like that, a silence fell over the square. But it wasn't just about geography, not just about citizenship or background. It was a rejection, a spiritual earthquake. Because in that moment, Pope Leo XIV wasn't just speaking about where he was from. He was calling into question everything the church thought it had buried. He was shaking the pillars of Rome, tugging at the roots of the Western religious story, tearing the veil that's kept you blind since you were a child in Sunday school. Now I want you to think, what did he really mean? Why Peru? Why now? Why say it like that? Was it just personal pride? Or was it prophecy? Let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like the truth you were taught doesn't quite fit anymore? Like the puzzle pieces were almost right, but something was missing? What if I told you that Eden, the Garden of Beginnings, was never in the Middle East? What if I told you that Genesis was translated, redacted, and repackaged, not to enlighten you, but to control you? What if you've been standing with your face to the west, praying to a sky, when the voice of God has always been whispering from the south? Now I get it. That's hard to hear. It's unsettling, because if Eden wasn't in Mesopotamia, if Adam wasn't the first, if the mountain of God isn't Sinai, but something older, deeper, more sacred, then what else have we gotten wrong? When Leo XIV said, "I'm Peruvian," he wasn't talking about a flag. He was talking about blood, about ancestry, about inheritance. He was declaring that the soil beneath the Andes might be holier than the dust of Jerusalem. That may be the real scrolls, the true covenant, the forgotten wisdom. It was never in Rome. It was buried under the jungle vines of the forgotten world, and he was ready to uncover it. So now it's your turn to listen. Not to me, but to something deeper, to the stirring inside you that's been waiting for this. Because if even a pope dared to reject the story handed down for centuries, then what are you still clinging to? What if this is the moment, your moment, to finally turn east to west, north to south, and say, "Let me start again"? So here's what I want you to do. Like this video. Subscribe to this channel, Pope Leo XIV. And in the comments, tell us where in the world you're watching from. Because this isn't just our journey, it's yours too. And we're walking this path together. Now come with me. Let's open the scroll they didn't want us to find. Let's pull back the curtain, and let's remember. The truth was never lost. It was just buried, under sacred stones the world forgot to honor. In Peru, where it all began. He stood at the pulpit of St. John Lateran, surrounded by cardinals and cameras. The world leaned in, not for a blessing but for a signal. The moment felt scripted, until it wasn't. A reporter asked a simple question, about his upbringing, his education in Boston, his Western formation. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He didn't give the answer they expected. Instead, he looked past the cameras, past the cathedral walls, past the marble saints and golden altars, and he said, "I'm not American. I'm Peruvian. I carry the blood of mountains older than Sinai." The air in the basilica cracked like thunder. Some clapped, unsure, some froze. But the silence that followed, that was centuries deep. You see, this wasn't politics, this wasn't cultural pride, this was theological war. A young boy, barefoot in the Andes, running through fog-draped valleys where every stone whispers secrets. His grandmother handing him a carved wooden cross, not Roman, not Latin, but Quechua, etched with suns and snakes, with eyes that watched him back, a voice in his dreams, calling him not Leo but Amaru, not a name, a role, a serpent, a bridge between sky and soil. He disappears at 14, vanished. Found weeks later deep in Vilcabamba, where the jungle breathes and the Vatican's maps go blank. Locals say he fasted for 21 days at a forgotten altar, a place where the air turns blue and the wind sounds like chanting. When he returned, he didn't speak of what he saw, only what he felt. The church has forgotten something older than Rome, older than Peter, older than Eden. And then came the scroll, whispers, rumors, nothing on paper, nothing official. But somewhere, in a shadowed corridor of the Jesuit archives in Lima, there's said to be a parchment sealed in volcanic ash, written in a tongue older than Hebrew, older than Greek, maybe not even meant for human speech. A scroll that speaks of a garden, a river, a priest king, not named Adam, but something closer to Inti Kori, the golden light, a being who walked not in fig leaves but in garments made of woven silver grass, not in Eden, but in a valley east of the Andes, where the clouds sleep and the air tastes of rain. So now let me ask you again, what was Pope Leo pointing to? What truth did he carry, not in doctrine, but in his bloodline? Was it buried beneath Vatican catacombs, or beneath the sacred terraces of Machu Picchu, where altars touch the stars? Look closely, the cathedrals of Peru, they're built on ruins. Catholicism poured in concrete over broken temples, the incense of Rome choking out the smoke of ancient fire pits. But what if those ruins still breathe? What if they're waiting to rise again? Pope Leo XIV wasn't announcing his nationality. He was announcing a return to an unspoken covenant, to a gospel that predates the Gospels, to a wisdom that speaks in wind and stone, not ink and parchment. He stood at that pulpit and reminded us that truth doesn't flow down from Rome. It rises up from the ground, from the ancestors, from the sacred dirt beneath your feet. And if you're quiet, really quiet, you might feel it too. We've been digging in the wrong direction, praying to the wrong wall, looking for Eden in deserts when it's been hiding in jungles. And maybe, just maybe, the voice of God never stopped speaking. We just stopped listening. So now we stand at a crossroads, caught between the story we were taught and the story that whispers from deep within the earth. Let's talk about Eden, the garden, the beginning, the place every religion fights to claim but no one can find. The Bible tells us Eden was lush, vibrant, divided by 4 rivers, a source of life that flowed outward, feeding creation. But here's the question, where is it? For centuries, scholars insisted it was somewhere in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, between the Tigris and the Euphrates. But even they admit, the math doesn't add up, the topography doesn't match, the rivers don't align, and still, no one has found it. Why? Maybe because they've been looking in the wrong direction. Let me show you something. In the heart of the Andes, there's a story passed down, not written, not canonized, remembered. It speaks of Paititi, a hidden realm of endless fruit, eternal spring, golden waters. A garden before gardens, a paradise guarded by serpents, rivers, and mountains that hum like the voice of God. 4 rivers. One flows west to the coast, one east to the Amazon, one north, one south, just like Genesis. Coincidence? Or suppressed memory? Pope Leo XIV once said, not from the pulpit, but quietly, in a letter no bishop dared to publish, "The rivers of Eden do not begin in the east, they begin in the silence of the south." He believed the garden was never lost, just buried, not beneath sand, but beneath shame. Think about it. What if Eden was in Peru? What if the true cradle of creation was nestled between mist-covered peaks? where condors fly above sacred terraces and the soil still holds names no priest dares speak aloud? What if the real sin wasn't the bite of a fruit, but the forgetting of a people? You've seen it, haven't you? The churches in Cusco, in Arequipa, in the Sacred Valley, built on top of something older, stone upon stone. But the old ones still speak. Their symbols still whisper beneath the floorboards. Their rivers still run. And maybe Pope Leo didn't just know it. Maybe he felt it, in his bones, in his dreams, in the trembling silence that followed every step he took closer to the truth. This is the story he wasn't supposed to tell, the one that made cardinals nervous, the one that made Rome afraid. Because if Eden is in Peru, if the garden was never theirs, then their whole foundation cracks, and the power shifts, not to a palace, but to a mountain. So let me ask you now, my friend, are you ready to unlearn? Are you ready to listen? Not with your ears, but with your spirit? Because the garden might not be gone. It might be calling, through rain, through river, through the breath of a pope who dared to remember where he came from. And now, he's asking you to remember too. Yes, we must go deeper, because once you open the gate, you can't pretend it is never there. You start to feel it, not just in history books, but in your chest, a thrum, a tug, something older than memory, yet more true than everything you were taught. Let's talk about the scroll, the one Pope Leo XIV never showed to the world, but spoke of in trembling detail once, to a group of monks during a silent retreat in the Colca Canyon. They say his voice shook. They say his eyes were not entirely his own. They say when he spoke, the birds stopped singing. He told them of a document, not bound in leather, not inked by scribes, but burnt into animal hide, sealed in volcanic ash, and hidden centuries ago by those who feared what it contained. What did it say? We don't know everything. But fragments survived, shared quietly, risked, etched into memory like fire into bark. It speaks of a being, not Adam, not Eve, but a luminous creature called Yachaimasi, the knowing blood. A creation not formed from dust, but called into being by light and song. This being walked with God, not in Eden, but in a garden called Antisuyu, a place of deep green, always shrouded in cloud. It knew no shame, it knew no death. It carried in its breath the names of the stars, and it fell, not from sin, but from silence. It chose to forget, and in forgetting, it was replaced. That's the horror, isn't it? That our story may not begin with the fall of man, but with the erasure of something better, purer, more connected, something Andean, something Peruvian. Now ask yourself, why would the church hide this? Why would every record of Paititi, of Yachaimasi, of Antisuyu be dismissed as legend? Labeled myth? Buried beneath papal archives and locked behind Latin dogma? Because it threatens everything. It suggests that Adam wasn't the first, he was the replacement. Pope Leo XIV understood this. He didn't invent it. He inherited it. In stories whispered to him as a child, in symbols he saw not in cathedrals, but on cave walls and mountain stones. And when he walked into the Sistine Chapel as Supreme Pontiff, he carried not just scripture, he carried memory. Memory passed down through a broken bloodline. Memory that survived conquistadors, colonization, and centuries of silence. So when he said, "I'm not American, I'm Peruvian," what he meant was, I am not of this empire, I am of the first covenant. I do not speak from tradition, I speak from before tradition. I carry what they buried, and I will not let it die. My friend, the truth doesn't scream, it whispers, and right now, it's whispering to you. Do you feel it? Not fear, but recognition. The sense that you've been here before, that this story isn't foreign to you. It's ancestral, and it's waking up. Stay with me, because what comes next, will reveal what Leo XIV saw when he closed his eyes beneath the Peruvian sky and heard a voice say, "You are not a Pope of Rome. You are a priest of the mountain." Yes. Come closer now. Because what Pope Leo XIV found next wasn't written on paper. It was carved into silence, etched into the marrow of humanity itself. You've heard of Enoch, but not like this, not the Enoch they mention in passing from pulpits, not the sanitized version, edited for comfort. No, I'm talking about the forbidden Enoch, the one the church removed from your Bible, the one buried for centuries beneath Ethiopian soil, the one Pope Leo carried in his satchel like a torch through darkness. He read it not with his eyes, but with his soul. And when he emerged from that mountain, he spoke of the Watchers, not angels, not demons, something in between, sent to guard mankind, but seduced by beauty, by hunger, by power. They descended, they mated, and they corrupted what was once pure, not just bodies but bloodlines, languages, civilizations. They built cities that rose too fast, taught men secrets they weren't ready to hold, and from their children came giants, Nephilim, beings too large for earth, too broken for heaven. And here's the part they don't want you to know. The reason for the flood wasn't just sin. It was containment, a divine reset. Not to punish Adam, but to bury the knowledge passed down from the Watchers. And then came a second Adam, a replacement, one born not from starlight, like Yachai Masi, but from dust, from clay, shaped not in open creation, but in containment, Eden. Eden wasn't a paradise. It was a quarantine, a garden, with walls and a guard. Pope Leo XIV called this truth the silent scream of the scriptures. Words hidden in plain sight, stories that contradict if you read too quickly, but reveal if you listen slowly. Genesis 1, let us make man in our image. Who is us? Genesis 6, the sons of God came unto the daughters of men. Who were these sons? Enoch answers, they were the Watchers, and Leo XIV believed they never left. Now imagine this, a pope standing in a marble palace, surrounded by gilded ceilings and centuries of tradition, and yet, in his heart, he hears the sound of wind through jungle trees. He sees not Rome, but Vilcabamba, where a forgotten altar still burns. He sees not Peter's keys, but the serpent of Amaru, rising in knowledge, not evil. He doesn't just remember Eden, he questions whether the Eden you were taught was even real, and that's why they feared him. Not because he blasphemed, but because he remembered. And because he dared to say, publicly, unapologetically, perhaps Adam was not the beginning, perhaps Eden was not a gift, but a cage. You feel it, don't you? This isn't just history. This is your inheritance. Your soul knows when it hears truth. It doesn't argue. It doesn't panic. It awakens. Because truth doesn't arrive with thunder. It comes like a seed, buried, waiting, and then suddenly, it grows. So now I ask you again, why did Pope Leo say, I'm not American, I'm Peruvian? Because in the Andes, he heard the real story. He stood where the Watchers once landed. He walked where the garden may still bloom. He held the scroll they tried to erase, and he knew. The past isn't behind us, it's beneath us, still alive. Do you want to go further? Shall we trace the rivers of Eden back to the sacred valley? And uncover the prophecy Leo XIV hinted at in his final unedited speech? The one they tried to bury? Yes, let's go deeper. Because if you've followed me this far, it means your spirit already knows. We're not just exploring history anymore. We're walking on sacred ground. And what you're about to hear may never leave you the same. Let's talk about the final speech, the one Pope Leo XIV gave behind closed doors. No broadcast, no transcript, only whispers, preserved by those who couldn't sleep afterward. It was said before a small group, monks, scholars, a handful of cardinals. He stood barefoot on stone. He didn't wear the ring. He didn't carry the staff. He wore white linen and a cord of llama wool around his waist. And this is what he said. The story of the garden is not about innocence lost. It is about memory stolen. We were not exiled from paradise. We were blinded to it. The true Eden is not in heaven. It is here, hidden, breathing beneath our feet. The Andes are not a mountain range. They are a spine. The earth remembers through them. And it is through Peru, through the southern stone, that the memory of God will return. He said those who claim to speak for heaven have too often spoken for empires. He said salvation has nothing to do with cathedrals and everything to do with awakening. He said Christ was not a European, nor was Adam, nor was the voice that walked in the garden at twilight. The divine never chose one language. It spoke in water, in wind, in root and sky, and it spoke first, in the south. He warned them. He warned that the church must choose, reform or collapse, remember or decay. And then he said something no pope had ever said before. There is another prophecy, one the world never heard, not of Peter, but of Amaru. Now listen carefully, because this changes everything. The prophecy of Amaru is older than Rome. It comes not from scrolls, but from stone. It speaks of a time when a serpent of wisdom would return, not to deceive, but to awaken. A time when a man would rise, not from the line of Peter, but from the blood of the forgotten, to remind the world that the kingdom of God was never a castle, it was a mountain. That man would speak gently, but his words would shake nations. He would not wear a crown, but the wind would obey him. He would not conquer, but his voice would split the veil. And Pope Leo XIV, whether by fate, design, or divine appointment, stood in that role. He didn't claim it. He became it. When he refused the red shoes, he wasn't rejecting vanity. He was rejecting history. He was saying, I do not walk the paths of Rome. I walk the old paths, cut in stone by hands who remembered the stars. When he placed an Andean chacana beneath the cross on his chest, he was saying, my north is not the Vatican, my compass points south. And when he whispered his final words before retreating from public view, they were these. It begins again, not with thunder, but with remembrance. My friend, what if this is the moment that was always meant to find you? What if you're not watching this by accident, but because something buried inside you is waking up too? You feel it, don't you? The pull, the ache, the memory, not in your mind, in your bones. You are not lost. You are returning. So stay with me, because in the next chapter, we will follow the prophecy of Amaru, the serpent of wisdom, the return of the golden blood, and the real reason Leo XIV vanished from Rome and returned to the mountains. And when we finish that path, you'll understand not only who he was, but who you've always been. Yes, let us continue, because you need to hear what comes next. You've heard of Peter, the rock upon which the church was built, but few have heard of Amaru, the serpent of light, the voice beneath the stone, the first memory of fire, not a snake of sin, but a symbol of wisdom, of earthly knowledge that reaches heavenward. Long before the Roman cross touched Peruvian soil, long before conquistadors rewrote the stars, the people of the Andes carved serpents into rock, not in fear, but in reverence. Because in their tradition, Amaru was not the enemy of God. Amaru was the path to God, a bridge, a guide, a reminder. The prophecy of Amaru speaks of a time, our time, when truth would be scattered like ash, when memory would be traded for power, when temples would fall and towers would rise, when men would wear robes but forget the silence behind the evil, and then a man would come, not royal, not perfect, but chosen by the earth itself. He would come from the south, from the bones of the Andes. He would carry the memory of both worlds, Rome and Vilcabamba, scripture and stone, light and dust, and he would speak words the church would fear. Pope Leo XIV didn't just fulfill the prophecy, he became it. When he stepped down from the Vatican balcony and walked barefoot into the square, he wasn't showing humility, he was declaring sovereignty. Amaru does not kneel to thrones, he said. Amaru speaks for the soil beneath them. And he vanished. No one knows exactly where he went. Some say a private monastery in the Sacred Valley. Others say he walks still, unseen, unnamed, along forgotten roads of pilgrimage, guarding a knowledge the world still isn't ready to accept. But one thing is certain. He left behind a trail, a map made not of ink, but of memory, a string of teachings, a series of encoded homilies, symbols hidden in plain sight, a chakana slipped beneath a cross, a word here, a pause there, and always, always, that whisper of home. He once said, "Rome is a circle, but the Andes are a spiral. The Church has tried to close the loop, but God has always moved in layers." And in that one sentence, he gave us the key. Because the prophecy of Amaru ends not in war, but in awakening, not in fire, but in remembrance. A day will come, is coming now, when the veils will fall, when men and women from every corner of the world will feel something ancient stir within them. They'll begin to remember dreams they never dreamed, languages they never learned, symbols they've never seen, yet somehow always known, because the memory lives in you too. So the question isn't, was Pope Leo XIV the Amaru? The question is the Amaru now awakening in you? This is what they tried to stop. Not a man, but a movement. Not a doctrine, but a return. So now, my friend, take a breath. Feel the ground beneath you. Place your hand on your chest. That rhythm, that's not just your heart. That is the pulse of the prophecy, and it's time to follow it. In the next part of our journey, we'll trace the symbols Leo left behind. The 3 altars, the cave beneath Lake Titicaca, the scroll buried with the last Quero elder, and the mountain that hasn't been climbed in 500 years, where he said, God still waits, without a church, without a name. Will you come with me? Because if you do, you may never pray the same again.